A woman's looks does not matter. It is how much she is doing for you that matters.
Expectations lead to disappointment. Expectations lead to arguments in a lot of ways.
You should not expect somebody to act a certain way, and when they do or don't, you should have a backup plan for that.
As I'm trying to figure out what's happening, why 40% or 50% of Black women over 40 are not married or have these in-depth relationships. Welcome to another edition of Why Love Waits. And as I start thinking through the last few episodes we did, we're on episode number 8 today. And what's just so fun and exciting is just seeing the reactions of the folks that are, that are watching, whether they're watching live or they're watching replays, and the messages that we're getting, because I think we're hitting topics that sometimes are not talked about, especially in our community. And I was doing podcasts this week. I was finding, many people, as we were talking about it, wanting to add to the mix. And so today we are continuing talking about expectations. We are continuing to talk about, as we think about expectations and we think about why we're not able to come together sometimes, why we're not able to come on common ground. And I think a lot of it just starts with what we believe it should be like, what we should believe we should have or part of a relationship. I know, one of our folks who was on this and says that he's sick tonight, sent us several messages this week where, one of the expectations of, and I'm not going to show that video today, but one of the expectations of one of the young ladies is she said she had 2 kids. And when she wants to go on a date, she said, my expectation is that whoever's going to take me out on the date should pay for babysitting for my 2 kids so that I can go out. And then there was somebody else who reacted to that. And, and then we think about talking about the single scene. And last week, I think we ended talking about the club, and whether or not folks that are in relationships should be out at the club. And what is the purpose of the club? If the purpose of the club isn't to hook up with each other, what truly is the purpose of the club? My opinion, of course, was I haven't been to it. Man, I can't remember the last club I actually been to when it wasn't like at a wedding or something like that. Had to be 30 some years ago. And so I have no idea, what happens to the club. I know what it was 30 years ago, but I have no idea in today's world. And I guess my goal is to hope that I never will know what a club is in the next 30 years as I'm married and just don't see a reason for me to go there at all. But where is it then that you go find somebody that you talk about your expectations and you talk about, some of those things that are super important relationships. And so I'm going to open it up to the panel to start out today and just kind of, as we think about expectations and think about, what should happen in the dating process. And maybe you guys can just kind of share with us maybe what your expectations were the last time, if you would like to share, maybe the expectations that you believed you have. But I guess now that whether you're in a relationship, you're married now, I think as I'm looking at who's on today, I think most everybody here is either married or been in a relationship for a while. What would you have changed now that you are in a relationship? And I guess I can add to that, later on, what I would have changed. Obviously, I'm getting ready to turn 60 years old in March here. So my expectations would be way different than they were when I was 24. It's not even close. But I'll let you guys talk first, and then we'll go from there. Who wants to jump in first?
Yeah, I'll jump.
All right.
So current marriage, I wouldn't change anything. My first marriage, I jumped in with expectations and not standards. And so my expectations, and I thought when we did our premarital counseling that we put all of our expectations out on the table. But there was those unspoken and those unforeseen and those things that created conflict later on in the relationship. But I realized that I got into that. I said yes to that marriage because I was tired of doing things backwards. That wasn't really a reason to get involved or let alone get married. But I still had expectations in that relationship, but I also walked into that relationship expecting to still operate independently. So without knowledge of the oneness that requires and the compromise that marriage requires. The second time around, like when I got divorced, and like that was the time that I had from the time that I made the decision to leave that marriage to the time that I found my forever, my new forever. That was clarifying time for me. And it was so beautiful because I got to like really kind of dive into where the story behind my expectations and the story behind my expectations. I don't think we go through that. I don't think we teach anybody how to do that. Like why do you expect this thing, period? And then are you also willing to offer that thing yourself? Are you able to meet your own expectations in that case? But then even more so, like the next step of that, I don't want to walk into my next relationship with expectations. I want to walk in with standards, because expectations are something that they can fluctuate, but my expectations are my expectations. So as long as I understand the story behind them and why I have them, okay. But most of the time it's coming from an insecurity or a need that was not met, or a hurt or a wound or something that's still open, or has been reopened. And that's not necessarily the healthiest space to lead from. But standards, when I'm sitting here processing, when I define standards, it's minimum inflexible requirements and qualities that must be present for you to exchange your time, effort, and energy with another person. So for those things to exist, that person needs to understand my expectations. That person needs to understand the story behind my expectations. I need to understand theirs. And then I have to also develop my standards. What's my bottom? These are non-negotiables for me. So I'm looking for certain behaviors. I've communicated my expectations, but I'm also looking for certain behaviors where I'm like, if I even see it in the dating or courting phase, I'm out. I'm out. But then there's also, I just lost my train of thought. There's also, once that's been communicated, like the agreement with this person. So that exchange that we're doing, I'm sharing mine, you're sharing yours. And then we have to see what our middle ground is. So you give, I give, and then we come together and figure out what ours is. And so once we come into agreement with each other after we've already shared both of our perspectives and both of our stories behind, then we get to come together and decide how we're going to move in alignment. And so the agreements that T usually talks about, that's the space where we get to. But I think expectations are necessary, but I think what we do with them is flawed.
Can you give me an example of a standard? Because you said I didn't have standards, but I had expectations. Mm-hmm. I know you have standards. Give me an example of what that looks like.
Person has to be a healthy communicator.
Okay.
So for me, I'm looking at, you take me out to a restaurant, or we go out to a restaurant, or we go anywhere where there's a service person. If you engage that service person in a nasty way, or in a demanding way, or in a just not unkind way, nope. I'm watching for small things. If the first time that you are inconvenienced by me or by a situation and I witness a reaction versus a thoughtful response, nope, I'm out. If you decide, if we're involved in a conversation and the conversation goes left or right, and we have a difference of opinion, I'm looking to see how you're processing that difference, how you're processing how you're going to respond. And if that response is volatile, if that response is argumentative, if that response is If a response is unkind, if that response is narcissistic, if that response, whatever that response is, if it's not favorable, nope, I'm out. So that for me is a hard line in the sand. If you're an unhealthy communicator, it's a no for me. That's a standard. But my job in setting those standards, my job is to pay attention to the behaviors that either align with that standard or that don't. And where we go wrong is that we allow things. You can't see red flags when you're wearing rose-colored glasses. Well, I refuse to put on the rose-colored glasses. I want to see all of it. I want to see every little bit of it. And as soon as I see a twinge of it, I'm out.
So when you think of unhealthy communication, you know, I know there's some folks that just don't have the vocabulary, or they've been taught to speak a certain way. And what they mean might be something different than the vocabulary that's coming out. Does that something, or you expect it to be spot on, right on, and you can train, I guess, or teach. I don't want to say train because I don't believe. I believe training is you tell somebody what to do, and then later on you tell them why they're doing it. That's the teaching part. But in that, I know there's some people that just don't have the vocabulary, or don't have but we're older, so that they should buy. You're talking to a 22-year-old. No, maybe don't have the vocabulary. You're talking to a 48-year-old.
One would hope. However, that's not necessarily true either. I don't expect perfection. I'm paying attention to a pattern though.
Yeah.
So if you say something and you say it a certain way, it's my job to get clarity. If it hit me funky, it's my job to call that out. Again, I said I'm confrontational. I'm not combative, but I have to confront that thing that caused me some kind of disruption in what you said. I have to be able to say, hey, you know what? This thing kind of rubbed me a certain way, or this thing hit me a certain way. Can you clarify? Or can you tell me what you meant? Or is this what you meant? And give them the opportunity to clarify. If they double down on the funky behavior or the way that they said something that was foul, nope, I'm out. So I'm gonna give you an opportunity, but my job on the other end of it is to decide what's okay with me and ask for clarity.
I like it. Tanisha, your thoughts?
So I previously talked about expectations in stating that I don't have expectations of other individuals. I have agreements. Standards I probably would use that word, but expectations is more for me and what I expect of myself and how I want to show up. And I believe that on the other side of that, then there's a conversation with the other person that I'm engaging with to explain to them how I communicate, the things that I've done to improve my communication. So speaking about like what I struggled with previously, and then why effective communication is important to me now. Because when I did not do these things, this was the result. And so I allow people to show up and be who they are. That is my space and place to decide based on their actions, based on their words or inactions, if I want to continue. Are they in alignment with my values? Are they in alignment with my morals? And I recognize that everybody's morality is not the same as mine. So to expect someone to be, it just leads for me to disappointment. I will constantly be disappointed. I know I use that statement with my son. I'm disappointed in you. Well, I expected him to be a certain way as a child, but he is his own person. So I had to learn to let go of that, because then my disappointment would go on to him, which would affect how he shows up. My mom's disappointed. So even in a relationship, if I was to say, I'm disappointed in how you showed up for me, that means I expected you to do something else, which means that I probably did not communicate effectively my needs, my wants, my desires, with you. We did not have a real conversation. So then in my head, I had all these things that I wanted from you or to say to you that I did not articulate. So I leave that, I observe, as Tia was talking about, watching someone, how they respond, like in a restaurant. That for me is more powerful than an expectation, because if I am meeting you for the first time, you say, hey, let's meet here at this restaurant, and you're already there. And I am, and this was a show that I saw, but I show up and through the window, I see you berating the staff. I'm already out.
Mhm.
I'm already tapped out because there's no compassion. And I don't know what happened, but there's a way to handle things. And so if you are already being dismissive or rude to these individuals, and I come in and you're stating your story and I listen, and I'm out. If you're not apologetic, if you don't recognize and realize there was another way, if you were receiving that bad a service, then leave. Because I won't be anywhere in a relationship or in company with being tolerated. I want to go where I'm celebrated. So if I see that, then I'm out. But that's a standard. It's not an expect. I don't expect you to be a good human being. I would want you to want to be a good human being for yourself. That's how I see that.
Can I chime in just a little? Just to add to what Nisha said. No one's perfect, and as human beings, we are flawed, and a lot of times when you're just getting into a relationship, and I know all of you have experienced this, that people's representatives show up, and they show up as long as they need to show up until they get what they want, and then you start seeing the trickle effect. If they're being authentic, then that's who they are, and that's great. But if they're not, then those layers end up being pulled back. Those red flags, you start seeing those red flags. You might have even seen some of those red flags during the courting period, but because the representation was so good that you just let it slide and say, "Oh, that's not too bad. I could deal with that." That's the same thing that's going to cause the relationship to fall later on, because what's not addressed in the beginning ends up snowballing into something larger later on.
Yeah. I'm just thinking, Tanisha, if many times where I tried and I was just missing the mark, and obviously this was a long time ago. I don't ever miss the mark now, right? But if somebody would have said, I'm disappointed in you, I think it would have devastated me. If that, to your point there, I think I did all this, I tried all this, and you're still disappointed in who I am. And as a man, if I'm really trying hard, I think that I wouldn't show that on the outside. I would be all tough on the outside, but on the inside, I think I probably would have went home and cried. So I appreciate you saying, and you recognize that there's other ways to express. I think of Renee now. She's just like, tell me. It'd be a little bit different now, but thank you very much, Alicia. I mean, what are you thinking in your thought process?
For me, I have been learning to really be open. Let's say before the relationship that I'm in now, I was so used to them already knowing what to do and what to say and XYZ. And that was because I had dated older men. And so they were already like, they had already been through the journey. They had already been through whatever they wanted to go through. But for me, it was challenging because now I'm entering into this new relationship. And in the beginning, it was like I had expectations that were like way too high for even myself, because I was like, well, I'm not even holding myself at that standard. And so a lot of people look at it like, oh, well, you're judging me based off of XYZ. And so honestly, if I look at the journey that I've been on for the past 7 years, I can honestly say that I've had to be open in many and different ways, making sure that my partner knows how I feel, being more open as far as communicating with them on how I feel, in the beginning, it was just kind of like, you should already know how I feel. You should already know because you've been around me for so long. And I noticed that ended up causing issues because it was more of assuming that they know everything, or they know you as an individual, instead of really growing with them, instead of, kind of separating them into this category that they really didn't even belong in. So that's where I'm at. I mean, communication was my biggest thing. I was not a great communicator. I know most women are like, communication. I was not a good communicator because I automatically thought like, hey, you know who I am. You should already know what I'm going to be doing. And that caused a lot of friction because it was like, well, I told you 3 months down the road that I was going to do this, and you should have remembered because I remembered. No, put it in the calendar, do what you got to do, and make sure everyone is all on the same page. So that's something I've had to learn over the past couple of years, just being pure and having those real pure intentions about what you really want and need, and being able to communicate that with the other partner. So yeah.
Being the mind reader, that's a tough one, right? Because we all think, well, I said it, or I thought it, or I gave you prompts or clues that you should be able to read, but those are your prompts or clues, right? They're the ones that you think that you would recognize, not what they recognize. So I appreciate that. Dwayne, I'll let you, I mean, I know you added in, but when we think of expectations on your side, from the male perspective, or their standards, or what, like when you were looking and saying, okay, I'm trying to find somebody that I can spend the rest of my life with. And I guess that's the question too. When we're thinking about dating and we're thinking about getting together, should we be thinking in the process, is this a person I could spend the rest of my life with? Because I think some people don't go into this process of dating, or process that finding somebody thinking that that's the ultimate goal. I think there's a lot of people who may date just to see, for having fun, I guess would be it. But you can answer that. You can answer that part first, and then go into your own standards.
So that's a loaded question. No, I came to this place where I started to think about the end in mind. It may sound a little morbid, but I always, I told T, I said, now I think about who is the person that in my last days, I'm about to leave this planet, who I would trust to follow through on my last wishes and to put me away the right way and take care of all my wishes, my needs, and and know my deepest feelings, and to make sure that my legacy is still carried out. And when you think about that person, that should be the person you want to spend the rest of your life with, because when you're with somebody and they don't understand that what you believe may not be what they believe, and you're telling them what your last wishes are, and they're telling you, I don't believe that, I wouldn't do that, you should do this. Well, don't tell me what you would do with my last wishes. These are my last wishes, and this is what I'm asking you to carry out. And if you have a problem with that, that's not the person. So, thinking with the end in mind helped me to really identify my values of what I look for in a person. But there was a long story in history before I even got to that point, before I even realized it, because going back and in previous marriages, how I ended up with the people that I was with that ended up being toxic, narcissistic, abusive relationships that just got out of hand. I look back at my mother, when my mother was raising 3 sons in Brooklyn, New York, single mom in the projects by herself. and watching my mother go through different relationships with men, and how some of those men treated her, and how as young men we wanted to step in and knock the door in and come in there with baseball bats and knock the mess out the dude, and our mother would stop us from doing that and would tell us that she got it, you know, she can handle it. But I know she was hurt knowing that we were exposed to that, we saw that. So as I got older and started getting into relationship, I realized that I was guys who wanted to come in and save the day and protect the woman, because I saw those women. I saw my mother in those women. They were women that were vulnerable, who needed someone to support them, who were struggling. And I wanted to be that guy to come in and say, hey, I got you. You know, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to be the man of the house. I'm going to take care of what needs to be taken care of and protect you. Well, that didn't work out too well, because I didn't take into consideration that there was another person who had their own history of trauma, and I was coming in there taking on a role that I was not equipped to fulfill as a man, and not having grown up in a household having those positive male figures around me. You know, there were a few, but my father wasn't there, so I didn't get that from my father. I had to seek that out from other men. So I went into situations taking on a responsibility and a role that I wasn't equipped to, and then when it became overwhelming and I wasn't able to fulfill those things, you know, the relationship became toxic. You know, the mistreatment, the devaluing of me as a person, you know, and it wasn't until the last one that I realized that you keep attracting the same type of relationship. It's just with different people, and it was almost like a run-on sentence. And the thing that came out of it was that I realized that I needed to love myself. I wasn't loving myself. I was putting that responsibility on them. I thought by coming in there and being the man of the house and being there for them, that they would love me the way I wanted to be loved, when I should have been loving myself. You know, and once I got out of the last marriage, and I took time to sit still and go in a hermit mode and identify, you know, what did I do wrong, you know, and to heal whatever in those relationships. But one thing I never did, I never closed my heart to love, because I knew that there was a love just for me, and that wasn't love. So sitting in that space and identifying that and putting God first, changing my prayer of what I wanted. Once I began to love myself, I got clear on that, of what I needed, not what someone else needed. Changing my prayer, because I never asked for permission in those other marriages. I never asked God for permission. I never prayed on it. I just jumped into it. And this time around, with my beloved wife Tia, I put myself through that process of healing, being vulnerable, of keeping my heart open to love, and talking about it with her, having conversations with her about my past relationships. And when I met her, you know, that didn't click immediately. It was the connection and the communication. And one thing about her that really stood out was I didn't feel like I was coming in and I needed to save her. I didn't feel like I was coming in or I had to do anything spectacular or special to her. I just needed to be who I was and you know, be open-minded and do something different and go through a different process. So she put me through a series of boot camp, like trainings. I won't say trainings.
He's not exaggerating.
Conversations, and that it really stood out was building blocks. When you're building a relationship, you need a foundation. And what's the foundation built on? The foundation is built on sex or looks or external things. You don't have anything to stand on. And we built that from the ground up. Our foundation was solid. It was built on both of our love for God first. That was going to be our foundation, because when everything else is stripped away, what are you still standing on? So this has been eye-opening for me. I think those other situations were lessons learned, and I'm grateful for the lessons that I learned, because it prepared me for this moment with my wife, and I'm grateful for that. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Oh, I love it. One of the things that I love what you said was, the way the person was treating your mom. And when I was thinking through the process of you thinking now, it was super important that if I was going to treat somebody the way that I would want my mom or my sister to be treated. And so I had to go back and start thinking, would I want me to treat my sister this way? Or would I want me to treat my mom this way? And I would love for other men to think that, because I think it would be a whole different conversation if they treated the person that they're dating or the person that they think that they want to be with as if, obviously I don't want you to think this is my mom, but at the same time, how would you want another person treating your mom or your sister? And I love that. When I think about like the love languages, right? How important is it that to be compatible? For me, I am acts of service, like, if we were on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm acts of service like 8. And so because I'm that way, then I'm always doing something for somebody. And then if that never gets reciprocated, then my love language tank is empty. Where like gifts is not my love language at all. That's like 1 or 2. And then so if somebody's handing me or giving me gifts, then I'm thinking that's silly. But I have to know if that's the person that I am dating or the person that I'm, that I need to first figure that out. And then I have to go beyond who I am to be able to, to be able to give those gifts, and then I think, and this is just me talking, I have this thing, I love kids, right? And that's why I have so many, and that's why we have so many grandkids. And, I could spend more time with kids. So when I see that video and see the lady like saying, I need you to pay for babysitting my kids, my thought would be, let's just take the kids with us. Whatever the date is, we go into, Great Wolf Lodge or whatever, and they play and then we talk. But I know most men are not like that. I know that that's, something different about me. But then if I was looking for somebody, then that would have to be high up on my list, or how are we interacting with kids and, teenagers or whatever, as I was a teacher at the time. So when I think about that, that's important on your standards, on your list, is finding somebody that meets the compatibility. And I think we settle for it. In so many situations, we settle for, well, I guess, he does these other things right, or she does these other things right, then that's enough. And, because, I guess if we're desperate, but we're really looking for, companionship, or we're really looking for, something to fill our need, to complete. I don't want to say complete, because that's like a funny word, I guess, but somebody to live life with. And then we settle, and I don't think we should. But at the same time, we got to treat people right, correct? I mean, treat every lady as if she's my sister or my mom, and I want them to be treated that way.
Yeah, and I would also say, and Tia and I have talked about this all the time, is how we move together. Finding our rhythm, finding our rhythm in life, and how do we balance all of those things, because they're never always going to be equally balanced, but we still have a rhythm and a way that we move and that we flow together, where we complement each other and support each other, and more importantly, support each other's individual growth, not just as a married couple, but as individuals, and supporting personal journeys as well. So there's a movement in there. It's almost like a dance, you know, and you got to stay in step, you know, because if you don't stay in step, then you out of step and you mess up the flow. And you know, that's something that I cherish. That's something I deeply cherish.
Cool. Well, I was going to ask Tahani and she disappeared, but maybe she'll be back. So I have a list. It's a list of 10, 10 expectation themes that Black women have said that are important. And I would love for you guys to maybe pick 3 out of this list and talk about why those 3 are the most important, or just throw out the list and add 3 different ones that are important. But this is like, you know, as we think of most important to least important, and I would say it from your life now, you know, because as we're doing these conversations and talking, I can always go back to what it used to be, but I really can't because my mind is where I am now. And so the list starts with financial stability. Then it goes into educational attainment. I put these in the chat if you're trying to look at them at the same time. So financial stability, educational attainment, traditional gender roles, emotional availability, physical appearance, shared ambition, cultural compatibility, perfectionism, avoidance of perceived red flags. And then that's just kind of like what T was talking about, avoiding any hint of behaviors that resemble previous negative relationships, even if those behaviors might be innocuous. And then the fear of settling. The desire to avoid settling can result in over stagnant criteria. And so out of those 10, you guys want me to read them one more time? Or you can tell me pick your top 3 out of that.
Okay, I'm just going through them again.
Me too.
Okay. Financial stability, educational attainment, emotional availability, physical appearance, shared ambition, cultural compatibility, perfectionism, avoidance of perceived red flags, and then fear of settling.
You said fear of self?
Settling, like settling for.
Settling down or settling for someone.
Settling for the desire to avoid settling can result in overly stringent criteria, which may exclude potential partners who don't fit an ideal mold, but could otherwise be a great match.
So I see. And you want to know which ones we are connected with as far as expectations?
Yeah, like give me the top 3 out of that list that would be important, you know, for you to say, as I'm thinking, or the man that I have is these 3 things. Like when I think of it, like cultural compatibility is important. I don't know if that's number 1. I would say I don't, financial stability for me, and is not important because I already know that I have the ability to create income, so that wouldn't be important. Educational attainment, not necessary. Traditional gender roles, no, that's not important. I mean, when I think of who's got to cook, who's got to clean, who's got to do that. Emotional availability, that would be one for me. Physical appearance, not as important. Shared ambition, super important. That probably would be the number 1 for me is, are we going down the same road? Because I just know how hard it would be. And then that ambition doesn't have to be so specific. Like we need to, as a couple, make $249,000 this year. If we don't have that ambition, but if I'm saying I do want to make, over $200,000 a year, and she's saying I don't want to, I'm okay with $20,000 a year, that would be, I guess, an issue for me. Cultural compatibility. Go ahead, Ashley.
Okay, for that, you're talking about salary, right?
I was just talking about money coming in.
Just money in general.
Yeah.
Is it more so of a self goal, or is it overall?
I would just say shared ambition. If that's me, because I'm an entrepreneur, right? So my ambition for money is way different than I want to work for somebody. But for other people, it's not. I mean, it could be, I'm just saying that's important to me that we're going in the same direction, that you're going to support me being an entrepreneur and not be on me all day long about, well, I need you to go get a job because I'm okay with, because I want you to be here every day at 5 p.m. and go to work at 9 a.m. and you get to go work 9 to 5, and then we go on our 2-week vacation and we're happy. Because if that were the case, then that would be really difficult for me to be able to fit into that mold, because I'm not going to work for nobody from 9 to 5. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I would say mine, Brian, was financial stability. Financial stability is one, because we have goals and
Perfection. Holding out, no, that's not going to happen. And then I'm not worried about past relationships because I think everybody has a chance to start over. Although I guess I would want to know about those past relationships and how much it affected the person, and then the fear of settling. I'm okay with that. So,
the educational attainment. I have so many thoughts on this. Just because someone has attained high levels of education does not mean that they apply them or believe in them. And so you can learn a lot from someone who did not attend these institutions, that has life experience, that will pour into you and uplift you and support you and just all of these beautiful things, versus just having this educational, like you went to whatever school, PWI or HBCU, and you've gone beyond and got, you have 2 doctorates and 3 masters. I don't care about any of that, because some of the greatest entrepreneurs or success stories are those of entrepreneurs who never had your typical education. So that's not important to me. But I would say emotional availability would be really important to me, to be able to have a space to share my thoughts and feelings and emotions, my heartaches, but also my joys, my highs, my lows, and the in-betweens. And then like some of these, what was it? Oh, a shared ambition is another one that would be good for me. Just so the financial piece, again, people base it on like money, essentially. Like you have to have this type of income or career success. But success is defined by that individual. So if I'm coming in and saying success means this to me, and this person has not attained this level of success that I have in my head, then it's automatically going to be a negative, but financially. But if we have like ambitions, shared ambitions of saying, hey, what is it that you want to do? Okay, how can I help you and support you to get there? We know that we want to do this. How do we work through this? What are our steps? What are the processes to get there? Maybe you do it first, and maybe it is going to get some type of formal education or certification to help leverage, understanding the word leverage, to help you reach whatever this ambition is. But the financial piece of it, I think it gets in the way, which is why we have so much conflict in relationships, because society tells women that man needs to have attained a certain level of success, and the success is defined by society. People who sometimes don't even have that success themselves, but they're telling you. So they haven't even done that thing that you are looking to have, or you want that other individual to have, and you're listening to someone who should not be given advice and will mess up everything. So I think it is, you kind of have to define these for yourself, but really being intentional about this financial stability, because that can literally take you off track. And you may be, if you're looking to be in a relationship, something significant, it may be a while if financial stability is number one on your list, and looks.
Yeah, well, I agree with you because for me, the shared ambition is way, way, way more important than financial stability because that shared ambition, like I said before, if it's me, because I can only speak for who I am, there's going to be a lot of ups and downs, and there's not going to be a lot of stability in the beginning stages of the risk that I'm willing to take. I guess that would be another risk factor that I'm willing to take compared to somebody who really wants to be financially stable. But I appreciate that. The emotional is super important. Yeah, thank you for that. That's
We need to be able to talk about it when it gets tough, like that emotional, like on both sides. Like, babe, what's happening? And how can I support you? And the support could be, I just need you to listen. I don't need any feedback, but to know that I am intentionally listening to understand, not listening to respond, will take that, my person will take him to the next level. That is financial stability to me, in that, because now he has a space and a place that he can grow, but a space that is safe for him to be vulnerable so that he can unpack whatever it is. And then vice versa, wherever I'm going through it, I need him to be emotionally available to hear me. And then we can figure this out together, and figuring it out may be not doing anything at that moment, but sharing the space and being grateful for that time, and then building upon that.
Love it. And then you also said education, and I think we put too much emphasis on formal education because there's so much education that happens that has nothing to do with paying money out of school so that they can give you a degree so that you can do something. So educational attainment to me is that you have enough, you're willing to go out and get what you need in order to do what it is that you're going to do. And that might be personal development, that might be trade school, it might be whatever it is. And then have you done that? Because if somebody's failed out of everything they tried and they're sitting home watching TV, then there's not a whole lot of educational attainment happening. It's just, well, I know how to play games, video games, and I'm really good at, well, if you're going to take that, like I have a son-in-law who went and got a master's degree in gaming, and so, he knows everything about it because he wasn't just playing him to play him. He was playing him to design him. That's a different education. And I think we put way too much on what's the paper behind your name? What's the, because I get you showed that you could finish school, but anybody who shows up every day, hopefully, that would be another thing I guess I would say. So you went to college for 8 years and you still didn't get your degree? There's, give me the reason why that you've been going to school this long and you still haven't finished.
I mean, that was me, but I think that I just had a conversation with a gentleman last night, and I was actually at a club, and I wasn't there looking for anybody. I was singing.
You were singing, which is fine. That's perfect.
I just thought I'd throw that back in there for James when he listens. For you, Brian, you and James. But I was at the club last night. But I was having this conversation, and this gentleman just shared that he loves playing video games. He goes to work, and his downtime is playing video games. And he was comparing himself to another family member who he adores. And I said to him, I said, well, do you love playing video games? And he said, absolutely. I said, did you know that you can get paid from that? He didn't know. But for him, he knows that he was feeling like he was being judged by other individuals because he loves to play video games. And I said, but there's you don't like college is not for everyone, but you can go learn something. This is something that you're passionate about. This will turn into some financial stability because this is a passion for you. You know everything about gaming. Go out there and do that thing. But I think people are struck on one set of type of education that someone can gain. It is listening to the ancestors. It is listening to the griots, the storytelling. It is through lived experiences. It is through personal development and reading the books and who you decide to listen to that is pouring into you and feeding your soul, versus going to a school you're sitting in a classroom where they may not even want you there. You are not getting the quality education, even though you are paying out all that money. I decided to get my degree because it was a personal goal for me. It was mine, not anyone else's, and it was determined on my time. I kept getting flagged. You need your degree. Do I? But it was something that I started it in 1995, and it was something that I wanted to finish as my son decided that he wanted to go to college. And so for me, I couldn't ask him to do something that I had not done. I could not be promoting and root saying all of this, and there was no foundation for him to have to come back and ask me. Otherwise, I would just have to put him with someone else, to mentor. But I wanted to do that for me. And so then now he can look back and be like, okay, I can go ask my mom about a bachelor's degree because she did that. But if he decided he didn't want to go to school, that doesn't make him any less.
Absolutely not.
It's just...
I love it. I love it. And when I was speaking to the 8 years and not finishing, I was speaking to the person who
oh no, I
it's full time for 8
right.
years.
No, I
know. The words of
God.
that dream and goal. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Was that well? And then I'll finish with the video games. The thing that can be tough about video games, it's like in some cases it's like a drug where there's a dopamine hit that they get. And then they shut off all other relationships, just like you would, some of our street drugs. And then they're playing this because it's giving them the entertainment and satisfaction without creating relationships. Yeah. And when you don't have relationships, I don't think God made us not to have relationships. And I think the gaming thing can get to that point where I got to go home, I got to get on this console, I got to play this game because that gives me the satisfaction of living life. And if I don't do it, then I have to, and that's where it can get addictive and scary. But there's nothing wrong with playing video games. Absolutely. All right. So Tia, what's your thought on our group of 10?
Some of these I'm concerned about.
Okay.
I'm just like, who was interviewed to create this list? And how old were they? And what have they been through?
Yeah. I know. But a lot of this is true, right? Because we think
I know.
Which is scary.
For me, it creates job security when I'm running a class. So thank you. And this is great. I think for me, my top one was not on this list, and it's values alignment.
Ooh. I like
So in values alignment, because if we're not aligned in that space, I ain't even going to share emotional stuff with you. I'm not going to trust you enough to be vulnerable with you. I'm not going to trust you, and I'm not going to be available. I'm not going to pursue. I'm not going to be involved. I'm just, no, thank you. I'm good. So I'm in observation mode in general. And if I see things that are just out of whack for me, I'm good. So values alignment is number one for me. The emotional availability after that, just because I've been in relationships where my partner was not emotionally mature nor available, yes, I'm going to leave that there.
I love it. You said mature and then available, because those are two
very different things.
Because I guess if you were mature enough, you'd be mature enough to be available. Probably, right? Maybe not. Maybe not.
Just mature
enough.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
I mean, you can absolutely be emotional.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's true.
You are an emotional mess, and you are absolutely available to invite people to your emotionally messed up party. And I'm just over here like, no, I'm good. I decline. I'm staying in my bed over here by myself. It's great. I don't want to come to that party. I've lived through that party. I'm so good. Emotionally abusive people are available to abuse you at all costs and at all points. I'm just not, I'm not here for it. So the emotional maturity part, that part matters to me more so than your emotional availability. Now to have both is a beautiful space. You are emotionally mature and emotionally available. Yes, I need that. Give me that.
Well, I think about like negative emotions that you're available for, like jealousy or anger or fear, or wanting to know where you're at all the time, or like
what's driving.
Yeah, what's driving all of that, and then you get all thrown off the handle and mad and screaming over oh, nonsense, right?
Fortunately, that part has not been my story. But again, part of the invitation, I'm gonna decline. It's not for me. So again, values alignment, emotional maturity, and availability. For me, mutual respect comes through. I think with the values alignment, I think there's an argument for shared ambition to fall under that, because if our values align, we're moving in a similar direction. Our trajectory might be different, but we're moving in a similar direction. And so in that space where we're moving in a similar direction, like we're going to come back together. Our roads are going to converge again because our values align. There's not a space where I'm going way off this way and way off this way. One, we've had conversations. We have a shared vision. We know where we're trying to get to, and we're also two different people, and know that our routes may be different to get there, but our vision is still the same. And our vision is based off of our values. So Dwayne and I have a beautiful value alignment with service. We both put ourselves in a space of being servant leaders. So that doesn't always mean that we're going to get, we're always going to take the same path, but we're going down the same road. We know that service is a value system. We know that we come back to each other, we have conversations, and we figure out what aligns with that particular value. And then also just valuing our own relationship. We're not putting other people above our stuff. But we also know where we're trying to go as a couple. We know we have a vision for where we're trying to move. That for me is super important. So when I talk about values alignment, those are some of those pieces. The shared ambition piece, as long as we're moving. We're in a season right now where I'm in build mode, and I've been in build mode for a while. So he's carrying and he's driving. And then it's about to flip here. So where he gets to be in build mode, and I don't necessarily know, I don't think I'll be driving, but I mean, we've got a rhythm. We've got it figured out. But again, the mutual support comes when we have some value alignment. Mutual support when we understand that, hey, this is our vision. This is where we're going to go. We have some sacrifices that we have to make. Hey, we have to take each other into consideration. Those things matter. For me, that's mutual respect as well. What? These stress.
I mean, there are a lot. That's why I skipped over, because some of those are important to me.
Well, you don't have to answer everyone. I think you've given us three that are really good.
Yes. Yeah,
Go ahead, Dwayne.
I said I don't have to say anything. I what I really enjoy is that we both understand each other's world. So when both of us come home from being out there in these streets, we can relate. And when we're talking, we're unpacking, it resonates with me. We can identify with each other. It's not just me listening, or not just her listening, unless that's what we want each other to do, just listen. But I can identify with her world. I understand what she's dealing with, and vice versa. So that's rare.
Yeah.
And neither one of us had it in our previous. And so to be able to find it in each other, listen. But that again comes with that emotional availability and that emotional maturity. Something is important to me. My world is important to me.
Of course it
His world is important to him. Service is important to both of us. And when we were coupled up with partners who did not get that and couldn't relate or couldn't understand, they can't effectively support us well. So to be able to find that in somebody else, oh my gosh. Listen.
Isn't it beautiful?
It's the everything for me.
That's beautiful, because you have to want to hear, like you say, you are able to understand her, even if you're not in the same same space as far as like service. Maybe you do something else. That other individual also has to want to be a part of that. Like, want to listen, want to be there. So again, that's why having like that emotional availability, being able to, and being conscientious and intentional about it is really important. And then when you have these conversations, you're able to tell and like maybe unpack like some things that you've been carrying to become emotionally mature, to become emotionally available, because maybe it has everything to do with how you were raised and how you weren't, what you saw and what you didn't see, and you did not recognize because your previous relationships didn't go this deep for you to be aware that, hey, I wasn't emotionally available. I actually wasn't emotionally mature. Or I realized that I just was not tapped into your world. I didn't mean to not be, but no one's ever called me out on that until you. And so then that person being intentional about hearing and listening and understanding like this experience and this journey that we're on as a partnership I think is important.
All right, thank you. Ashley, I know one of yours might be like somebody actually calls you the right name, because I think I called you something else at the beginning of the show. So,
It's okay. I know who you was talking to.
oh my God.
I have to address this because this is kind of funny. I've been watching the comments, and Nathan is like, I find. Listen, I have to ask this one. Okay, so I have to. He said, I find the desire to avoid settling extremely troubling and problematic. I need to know what he means by this. I really do.
Okay. Yeah, my desire to avoid extremely. Well, that's going to be one of the questions that the last question I want to begin the conversation about, and this might fit into that, is I really want to talk about how do we have these difficult conversations and what are we doing to avoid them? Because I think we avoid having tough conversations because we don't want to be hurt, or sometimes we don't want to hurt the other person. And I think there's ways to say it where you don't necessarily, but those are very hard conversations and we avoid them, and then they build up, and then it comes out in some emotional blow up because we haven't been willing to have these tough conversations like, hey, baby, you're not going to be able to spend any more money this month. I mean, that might be one of them, or or a conversation, there's all kind of them that we can go. I don't know why I brought up a money one, but in all the emotional ones and that kind of stuff. So maybe that's what. And Nathan, if you could just clarify that on the comments here.
Let us know what's on your heart, what's on your mind, and what's on your heart.
In other words, who hurt you? Who hurt you?
Talk to us. This is a safe space.
So while we're waiting for him to answer, I should go ahead and tell us in your this list.
Okay, so for me, it would be really. I kind of stumbled into becoming an entrepreneur, just kind of out of passion. I wanted to work with young girls. I was, I see myself in a lot of them and some of the things that they were going through. And then not only that, I ended up partnering with my mother for her printing company. So it was like working in a space where you are literally grinding every moment, every minute of the day. And sometimes you work late because you have to just get things done. That in the beginning was like an issue. It was like, why don't you just find a job and or go back to what you were doing before because you were making good money? And it was just like, no, I have a calling. And so I have to do this. I have to do this. And if I don't do it, I won't feel complete. And so I think that was a big thing for me because I didn't talk about where I wanted to go or what I really, really wanted to do. And again, in the beginning, I worked a full-time 9 to 5. So it was a little different. But then when I started to transition, having that real conversation, like, listen, some months is going to be a little rough. So I'm going to need you to hold it down and don't complain about it. Just do it. But that was where I was, right? But really just having that time and being able to really explain to my partner what I wanted to do, that that became an issue in a sense in the very beginning. But now that he's an entrepreneur, oh, I'm sitting back going, yeah, now you know how to feel, huh? Not for real, but that's what I be thinking. And so for me, it was like, okay, now that he sees where I'm going, or what I was actually doing, then he can actually appreciate that. Some people don't see that because they literally are 9 to 5 workers. They are just, I'm not going to say yes people, but they are just employees. And sometimes you have to accept that they are just employees. On the other hand, you have those other people that are entrepreneurs that are making something, or even bringing wealth to to your family, and having that big vision, having that ambitious goal that you have. I mean, all the passion that you have within, it just brings it all together. Now that he's in that space, now I'm saying, okay, you might not want to do that because this is where the mistake was for me. This is what it was for me. So um, I can actually appreciate that for him, because now I see, hey, I have to build something. I have to build an empire for my family, because at the end of the day, that 9 to 5 is not going to do that. It's just going to bring income in. So when we talk about financial stability, that can go many and different ways. I mean, I hear a lot of young people say, I'm trying to get the bag. And you're like, well, how are you trying to get it now? Because you gotta have some boundaries. You gotta have rules. You gotta have a clear vision on how you're gonna get this bag. If you're walking into a space where this man already has money, is it yours, or is it is it yours, or is it his, or is it y'all's together? So which one is it? So looking at that, it's not necessarily saying, oh, they have to have money so I can live big. It's more so, what am I going to leave for my family after I leave this earth? That's how I look at financial stability. It's really bringing wealth. Okay, so this one is a big one for me. Being emotionally available. I know Tia really, but for me, it is not just being there physically, because some people feel like if I'm there physically, I'm there as emotional support, or I'm there because they need me to be there, and spending time with them. That is not always the case. So it's more so being intentional about what it is that you're doing. And being emotional available is not only being physically available, but being able to have that openness and actively listening to what's really happening, and be able to resolve that issue in the end. That's where I kind of see where that emotional availability comes from. I can cry on your shoulder all day, but that doesn't mean you're listening to me. I can say, complain about XYZ, but that really does not mean that you're listening to me just because you're present. What are you actually doing? So being physically availability, that's a big thing. I want to say that's it for me. I think the biggest thing is believing in your partner and whatever journey they choose to go on. Honey, you can get the bag any time of the day. Just enjoy it. When you have it, enjoy it. But make sure you leave some stuff behind so your kids don't be suffering. Okay.
Gotcha.
That's all.
No, I love it. And it sounds like shared ambition is part of that, is part of what you're saying too. But you brought up something that everybody else didn't bring, is that physical availability. And I know, the affection part and all that, sometimes men are, that's at the top of their list. And sometimes for women, it's not. So, all right. So Dwayne, let's talk about you in this list and your thought process here.
Okay. In no particular order, but I mean, shared ambition of course, we spoke about that earlier. Understanding each other's world, and being able to support each other in our goals and our ambitions and our personal and professional development. But even more than that, the emotional availability. So I'm always trying to anticipate my wife's. I'm always in tune with her, and I'm always studying her. I'm a student of her. And so that sometimes she doesn't even have to ask. I just anticipate. I can watch her and tell what she may need at that time. I think probably 99.9% of the time, I'm right on point from what she tells me. So I think that's important, and she does that for me as well. We're always trying to make sure each other's good. So emotional availability is just not is being in tune. Is being in tune with your partner. It's selfless. It's not about me. It's about her. It's about us. If she's not good, then I'm not good, and I'm trying to get her better. So that's important. Financial stability. We have goals, and money buys freedom. It buys the things that we dream about, that we envision, that we want to do. So we want to make sure that we're financially secure so we can enjoy each other. We want to work smarter and not harder, because the one thing you can't get back is time. So, money buys you freedom, and it's about quality time. We both have ambitions to start philanthropy organizations, so that we can give back and do our passion work, our passion projects. So, we're working and we're doing these things, but we have visions for each one of our gifts and what our gifts are going to allow us to buy and purchase in our lives. So not just for us having time to spend with each other, because we're getting older, and you want to the fruits of your labor, not when you're old and you can't get around as well. You still want to enjoy that when you're young and vibrant, but we also want to be able to give back to the community and help those who are marginalized and underprivileged. So we're intentional about those things, but they all tie together, and there are constant conversations going on about that daily for us.
I like it. Thank you for sharing that. I'm back to the comments that are online, and I think Nathan was struggling a little bit with the fear of settling. When I think of the fear of settling, what comes to mind when I think of that is whether you're a woman or man, going, okay, let's say one of your goals is to have somebody who looks good, right? Who is physically attractive, because that's we talk about it a lot. We're not talking about it because I think this group that's not our main goal, but for a lot of folks it is. And then, you said, well, he has all these other traits, but he sure don't look too good. And I'm fear if I settle for this, I'll never find the guy who looks really good. That's just an example that I have, Nathan. I don't know if that helps. And it said, just hearing, go ahead.
The 80-20 rule.
Yeah. I love it. And then he said, just hearing someone say that they are settling. Yeah, so I think we saw that. And then Marion's been saying a few things. Shared ambition can produce financial success, and that's good. A student of her, which I think are all just super important when we think about this. I really want to transition a little bit we'll spend the last about 15 minutes just kind of talking about those hard conversations. How do we make sure that we're having those conversations? And it could be anything. I mean, I think we think typically of these intense emotional conversations, but for us, those are the conversations that we have that we don't want to have, and we let them go. I guess, for instance, it would be, I really want to go after this. It's a risk. I didn't tell you, but I just spent $20,000 of our savings That's a super hard conversation. And I didn't tell you about it. It's been 20 grand. Yeah, I mean, but even in, another conversation would just be around, you know what? I need to spend more time with you, or I feel like I need to spend more time with you. What? But you're not spending time with me. That's a hard conversation because we think it's going to hurt them if they say that. What are your thoughts on those things?
I just see your wife in here, and that just cracked me up.
But she said bye-bye.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
She's like, bruh, bye.
I feel you. Yeah. The hard conversation was something that I had to deal with for myself. I didn't know how to have hard conversations because I wasn't raised in that way. A child should be seen and not heard. So speaking up and using my voice, I always felt like I was going to hurt someone else's feelings, not even in a relationship, just any relationship. Mm-hmm. And so I had to work to understand that if I do not communicate and share what is going on, no one will know like how to show up for me or what I need. They will not recognize like if they have done something, because the reason why I don't have expectations is because I started with that. And so in my head, I had all these thoughts, and you should just know me, and I'm feeling this way, and you hurt my feelings. So everything was you statements, and it was less about me when it should have been everything about me, and saying, how do I show up? How do I have the conversation that says, I need more time. I need more of your time with me. Or when you say this is what I feel. Or when you said that, I was triggered. And so to break it down, I was afraid of having the hard conversations because I didn't want to hurt anyone else's feelings because I was sensitive at that time. Now, what I recognize is stating, like having a conversation of saying, how are we going to communicate when the situations get tough? Whether it is romantic or just in general with family, like having that conversation of how you're going to communicate and to make sure like when I am saying these things, it is not to hurt your feelings. Like, and that is my purpose. I don't know everyone else's, but I was real petty. So if I felt you cut me, Queen Petty here, I'm gonna hurt you harder. But we didn't have those conversations. So if I would have had the conversations, I wouldn't need to be Queen Petty. Mm-hmm. If I was okay with self, if I was at comfort with self, if I loved myself the way that I deserve to love me, then these conversations wouldn't be as hard. But I didn't know how to love me. I didn't know how to communicate with myself. I forgot what my own voice sounded like. I forgot what my divinity was, that voice, that whisper in my ear to tell me how to move, and when not to. So to speak up, it was like, no, but now I just say it. And sometimes it's strategic because everything is not my pig or my farm. Everything is not my business or ministry. Everything is not. So I am strategic about, is this really important or am I being petty? Because I've been petty since the womb. So if you want to try me, we can go there, but we not. So I'm gonna bring it back in and just say, is this really important? Is this something that needs to be addressed now or can it wait? And if it's something that is really strong and needs to come out, I'm going to say it instead of waiting because that festers up and causes cancer. It causes disease, which is dis-ease. It causes disconnect. And so then it just piles up. So having the conversation about how we're going to communicate, what is needed in that communication, what that other person needs, because it's not just about me. I think you can have those hard conversations and come out on the other side much better and stronger.
I like that. Who else wants to
be petty? Be petty. Tell me.
And that's how you show up to that. You show up to that conversation too. You show up to the conversation with emotions and wearing it on your sleeve, and it doesn't usually go well when that's happening. And sometimes we just want to bow out, right? When we start those conversations, we want to walk out. I can remember this has been several years ago, but when I want to just walk out, I don't want to have this conversation. I want to talk to you about this. And I can remember, she'll probably laugh on here, but I can remember Renee running to the door and locking it so I couldn't leave. You're going to have this conversation. And I'm like, no. She's like, no, you ain't going nowhere, locking me in. But yeah, I mean, we have to be able to show up, and I guess it's how we show up in these tough, difficult conversations. Actually, I see you smiling and laughing. What are some ways that we get to have these and know and continue to get better at it? Because that when we talk about communication and it being so important, that's where it breaks down.
So I had to learn not to be petty, because I would like start from like ground zero. Like I would do a low blow, like, so remember when boom, and then it hits hard, and then they're like, you said you ain't never gonna bring that up again, and then it starts more of a argument, and then it's like now I can say what I want to say, and it never got across that way, because then at the end of the day, they only remember what I said in the very beginning, and what I really wanted to say, they didn't hear it at all. So I kind of started doing like little questions here and there, like, so what do you feel about me doing this? And they're like, okay. And Jamal would go, what do you want? So it was just like being intentional about what you want to accomplish, and not necessarily hurting anyone. And sometimes it's okay to hurt someone, not in an intentional way, but kind of disrupt their feelings a little bit. I'm using Tia's words. Disrupt their feelings a little bit. But really, it's just I really had to really sit down and have real conversations and not be so emotional. I had to take my emotions out of it. I had to be more realistic about the outcome, even if it was not what I wanted. And going from there, but every now and then I can be a little petty. I kind of miss those days just a little bit, but
You do.
only this much. But now that I've grown and the maturity level
There you go.
is really just started to show. Being mature. Honestly, if you're not mature enough to have those real conversations, those conversations will never happen.
Mm-hmm.
Or anything, it will turn out really bad. It will turn into argument. It will turn into a whole fight that should not have ever happened. But if you really just take the time, think about it, do what you need to do. And sometimes you have to write it out. Sometimes if you write it down and then say, hey, this I want to talk to you about X, Y, Z. Are you emotional available to hear what I have to say?
I love it, because when you think emotions high, intelligence low, right? So when you are in this heavy emotion, your intelligence is not happening. And so when we think about timing, I know Marion said something like, pouring salt on wounds, but then she said, think of the end before you begin. Well, if you're in a high emotional state, there's no way you're thinking about the end. You're thinking about, I got to lash back out. Because the other big one that I learned about 20 years ago that I've stuck to is hurting people hurt people. And when people are hurt, they're going to lash out and they are going to try to hurt. And if you can find out why they're hurting, that solves 90% of that battle, if you're willing to listen to that without lashing right back. And maybe, Tia, you can just kind of talk to, the right timing to have these conversations instead of just jumping in and going off and, that isn't really going to solve anything, because then now two people are emotional and two people are going at it. And then, so we'll kind of let you. finish up with this conversation for today.
Yeah. So I was actually raised differently than Tanisha. My mom emboldened my sense of ask all the questions, ask all the hard questions, and then watch how they respond. So I probably should have either been an attorney or a detective as an adult, because I had a whole lot of training growing up. So I am super comfortable asking those get under your skin, get naked questions. But it's because it needs to make sense in my head. Like I need to see some congruency with your word and your action. And if I don't see it, if it disrupts me in any kind of way, I need to understand why. And I need to understand the story behind it. So I get real. However, what I realized in my big age, while I started navigating the world, there are not a lot of emotionally mature people that welcome that kind of inquisitive personality. Mm-hmm. So just being cautious. I think one thing is, what's your intention going in? Why are you asking questions in the first place? What do you need to know? Where's the significance of this person going to be in your life? Or are you trying to get something from them? So are you trying to place them in a priority position? Are you trying to get something from them? Are you trying to persuade them? What's your goal in the first place? What's your goal in going in the first place? So I think clarifying that for yourself is going to be one thing. If I'm scared to ask hard questions, I'm probably going to be scared to answer hard questions. So I posture myself in a space that I'm not going to ask you anything that I'm not willing to answer myself. And that sometimes, I guess, that can happen in the reverse. But I have a desire to be known. I have a desire to be in connection with people. I have a desire to be in relationship. So for me, that's the only way that I know how to be in relationship with people. And so I can't engage in surface level conversation. It stresses me to the nines. That gives me anxiety. So when we're dealing with, oh, how's the weather? I just can't. So I will remove myself. But when people are hot, like that's kind of one of those things. I attach myself, my two previous relationships, I attached myself to two people that were very emotionally erratic, and emotionally immature. And I took for granted that they weren't raised like I was. My first ex, he was very much raised with, hey, when you have an argument, the way that you argue is you say the loudest and the most hurtful things so you can get your point across so you can win. I was not raised that way. I was very much raised with, you say the things that you mean and you mean the things that you say. And you don't intentionally hurt people's feelings. When you say that you love somebody or you care for somebody, you don't say things to intentionally hurt them. And so the way that we conflict, it don't work. It's like oil and water. It doesn't work. And that not quick enough, but quickly turned into a situation that I can't be in relationship with you. Because our conflict styles are very different. Our negative conflict styles are very different. Our communication styles are very different. And this is just that's not how I want to live my life. And so even if I come to you in a calm space, even if I come to you and I'm in a space where I'm rational and I say, hey, the best way, and I'm teaching you how to engage me, the best way for you to understand, or the best way for you to hear me, or the best way for you to, and I'm teaching you about me, you still are not going to be able to receive it. So paying attention to who people are and how people are and what their communication styles and conflict styles are, that matters. And you can do that with observation. You can do that. You can only do that with questioning. Two things. You do it with observation and you do it with questioning. I don't ask questions that I'm not willing to answer myself. I will put myself out there before I expect somebody else to put themselves out there, because I feel like because other people didn't grow up the way that I did, I have to model what I expect. I am very much a processor. So if we are in a conversation and it devolves into something that is all the way left and not productive, I know the power of my tongue. Look, I'm reforming, and my mouth is slick. I'm the youngest child, and I'm not petty. I'm mean. So I know myself, and I can say some real hurtful stuff, and I can cut you with my tongue. So, but because I was taught that you don't say things to hurt people that you love, I guard myself. I guard my mouth. And I wasn't always that way. I had to learn it. And I had to get knocked on my butt in order to learn it. My mouth is going to betray me, especially when I'm dealing with matters of the heart. So it doesn't matter what kind of relationship you're in. There's a matter of a heart. If I've allowed somebody to be in my heart space, I have to intentionally not say things that are going to cut you. So for me, in order to do that, if I've attached myself to people who are bear pokers, you poking, okay, you gonna get some fire. You eventually gonna get some fire. I'm gonna unleash all that she has for you, and I will not apologize because I mean what I say. I say what I mean, and I mean what I say. And in that moment, I had asked for what I needed was to give me some time to process. But since you chose not to, you're gonna hear it. You're gonna hear all of it. I'm not gonna apologize. It's gonna be what it's gonna be, and let the chips fall where they may. So what I had to learn is to ask for what I need. I advocate for myself. I need 15 minutes to myself to process what I need to say, what I want to say, what I'm going to say. Otherwise, the things that come out of my mouth are going to be real hurtful and disrespectful, and it's going to cut you. And you're not going to like me for a while. So I'm very honest with how I am and who I am and the authority and power that I know I have. And I'm not going to apologize for what I say. I don't. So whether it hurts your feelings or whether it don't, that's not my issue. I asked for what I needed. Now, if I choose to violate that for myself, then I have a conflict with my own self. But if I asked you for what I needed and you chose not to give that to me, I still have some control. I do have control, and I chose to, let that control go. But I think people need to get better about advocating for themselves. They need to get to know themselves a little bit better. They need to advocate for themselves in that space. If you know that you're a hothead and you need 15 minutes to breathe, you need to ask for the 15 minutes that you need to breathe when you're in a rational state and when it's in a calm state, not when you're all elevated. And just honor yourself in that space. People also need to see that modeled, because if they haven't had it modeled, they don't necessarily know that that's okay to do. But again, me and the husband here, we made some decisions on how we're going to engage when we have conversations that might not be great, or how we're going to engage when we have, there's certain things that we're just not going to do. There's certain things that we're not going to say to each other. There's certain things that are not, we just not going to talk about because they're not options. So making that decision when you're calm and you're rational on the front end versus when you're in the thick of it, that's going to be huge. Ask for what you need, advocate for what you need. But if you don't know what you need, then you need to spend some mirror time. What activates you? What disrupts you? I hate the word triggers, but what triggers you?
We got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then give yourself permission to remove yourself from the environment, but you got to communicate that you need to be removed from the environment. You can't just bail.
Oh,
you can't just bail. You got to communicate and then make a decision to come back together and have the conversation. And what are you coming together for? Are you coming together? Are you having this conversation to be right? Are you having this conversation to understand? Having this conversation to meet some common ground and move forward? You got to make a decision on where you're at and what you're trying to accomplish. So that was a whole long-winded thing of,
Well, thank you. And we're going to pick this up when we come back next week. But so amazing. And thank you. And for those of you who are watching and you've engaged and you're learning a ton as I am, realize that as we say things, we're probably giving you the best of what worked. We're not telling you all the stuff, but it did work. Because all of us have been through, just as you have. These conflicts. And, one of the things that Tia just said that I pulled out of there is you don't always have to be right. You don't always have to be right.
Most of the time you're not.
Most of the time you're not. And are you seeking to understand, and sometimes you are, and the other person doesn't want to understand. They just want you to listen, and then are we going to be able to come to some common ground? And I think that's so important. And then as Marion said on here, is timing is everything. There's some times when you need to put that aside and it's not time to have the conversation. Even though it's going to be a hard conversation, sometimes you have to have them, but not as maybe at the exact time that it all happened and came down. We're going to talk about this, or we're going to talk about it right now, and you're going to listen. Though when that emotion is so high, oh my gosh, you're just going to go further down a rabbit hole that you don't want to go. So thank you guys for being here on another amazing episode of Why Love Waits, and I can't wait till we can continue to talk and For those of you who are on the panel, thank you tremendously for being there. And for those of you who are in the chat today, it has been phenomenal. We will be back next week. I am not going to compete on the NFL on Super Bowl Sunday, so we will take the week after next off, so that we will come back. So next week, and then we'll skip a week and be back, because there's no chance I'll be sitting on here by myself on Super Bowl Sunday if we try to have a meeting. And so again, thank you guys for being on. Thank you for just being part of this. I think we're making a difference in people's lives. And so again, you guys have an amazing, awesome day. Don't forget you are God's greatest gift. He loves you if you allow him to. And we'll talk to you in the next one.
Thanks.